My husband said I was too sensitive about his mother's comments until his father took me aside at Thanksgiving and said, "I've been waiting 30 years for someone to stand up to her." I almost dropped my wine glass. My father-in-law had barely spoken 10 words to me in 4 years of marriage. Now he was gripping my elbow in the hallway, eyes desperate like a prisoner signaling for help. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He glanced toward the kitchen where my mother-in-law was loudly criticizing my green bean casserole. "She's done this to every woman who gets close to this family. My sister stopped coming to holidays in 1994. My own mother died without reconciling with her. And my son?" He paused. "He doesn't see it because he grew up in it. 4 years of being told my cooking was bland. 4 years of comments about my weight, my career, my decision not to have children yet. 4 years of my husband saying I was overreacting. Why haven't you said anything?" I asked. His laugh was hollow. "I tried once. She didn't speak to me for 3 months. Told everyone at church I was emotionally abusive." From the kitchen, her voice rang out. "I'm just saying, store-bought rolls would have been better than whatever these are." Something in me shifted. I walked back into that kitchen with a calm I didn't know I possessed. My mother-in-law stood at the counter, holding one of my rolls like evidence at a trial. "Gwendolyn," I said, her full name. I'd never used it before. "I've spent 4 years listening to you criticize everything I do. My food, my body, my choices. I've smiled through all of it because I love your son and wanted peace." The kitchen went silent. "But peace isn't possible with someone who doesn't want it. You don't want a daughter-in-law. You want an audience for your cruelty." Her face went red. "How dare you speak to me like this in my own home? How dare you speak to me the way you have for 4 years in front of your son, who just stands there?" I looked at my husband. He was pale, mouth open. Every comment about my hips, every dig about my job, every remark about children, I've cataloged them all. 4 years of documentation. "This is absurd," Gwendolyn sputtered. "Control your wife." But my husband wasn't looking at his mother. He was looking at me. "She's right," he said quietly. The room inhaled. "Mom, she's right. I've said nothing because I was scared. Of you. I've always been scared of you." My father-in-law appeared in the doorway, eyes wet. Gwendolyn searched the room for an ally. Her daughter looked away. Her son studied his shoes. "This is a mutiny," she whispered. "What you've done," my father-in-law said, "is make everyone afraid to be themselves, including me." 30 years of silence finally breaking. Gwendolyn grabbed her purse and walked to the door. She turned back, finger pointed at me. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." The door slammed hard enough to rattle windows. That night, my husband and I lay awake in his childhood bedroom. "She'll never forgive this," he said. "I know. Do you regret it?" "No. But I need to tell you something. Before dinner, your mother pulled me aside. She told me why she's really hated me from the start." His face went pale. "What did she say?" My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I read the message and my blood went cold. "Did you know your mother was married before your father?" I stared at the screen, reading the words 3 times before they made sense. "Who is this?" I typed back. The 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. "Someone who knows what Gwendolyn is really hiding. Ask her about Raymond Voss." My husband was watching me, his face a mixture of concern and exhaustion. "Who's texting you this late?" I turned the phone toward him. He read the message. I watched the color drain from his face in real time, like watching milk spill across a counter. "That's not possible," he said. "My parents have been married for 32 years. I've seen their wedding photos. I've heard the stories 1,000 times. They met at a church function. Dad was a deacon. Mom was singing in the choir." I scrolled up to show him the first message. "Did you know your mother was married before your father?" He grabbed the phone from my hand, staring at the screen like it might burst into flames. "This is ridiculous. Someone's messing with us. Probably one of Mom's church friends trying to stir up drama after what happened tonight." But his hands were shaking. I took the phone back gently. "There's one way to find out. We're not calling my mother at midnight to ask if she had a secret first husband. I wasn't suggesting we call her." He looked at me. "Then who?" "Your father." The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. "He finally knows the truth, after 30 years of keeping her secrets. He told me in the hallway that he'd been waiting for someone to stand up to her. Maybe he's been waiting to tell someone the truth, too." My husband sat up, running both hands through his hair. "This is insane. My entire family just imploded over dinner rolls, and you want to interrogate my father about a mysterious text from a stranger. I don't want to interrogate anyone. But don't you think it's strange that your mother has hated me from the moment we met, before I even had a chance to do anything wrong?" She looked at me at our first dinner together like I'd already betrayed her. He was quiet for a long moment. "I always thought she was just protective," he said finally. "That she'd be that way with anyone I brought home. Has she been that way with anyone your brother brought home? Your sister's partners?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. Gwendolyn had welcomed his brother's wife with open arms, had practically planned their wedding herself, had cried tears of joy at his sister's engagement party. But with me, from day one, there had been ice in her eyes. "What did she say to you?" he asked. "Before dinner, when she pulled you aside." I closed my eyes, remembering. I'd been setting the table when Gwendolyn appeared behind me like a ghost. She grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks and pulled me into the pantry. "You think you're so clever," she hissed. "You think you can waltz into this family and take everything I've built." "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered. Her eyes narrowed. "Where did you grow up?" The question caught me off guard. Cedar Falls. You know that. I've told you a dozen times. Cedar Falls, she repeated, like the words tasted sour. And your mother's maiden name? Whitfield. Why are you asking me this? She released my wrist and stepped back, studying me like I was an equation she couldn't solve. Because I don't believe in coincidences, she said. And you showing up in my son's life is too convenient to be chance. Before I could respond, my father-in-law called us to the table. Gwendolyn smoothed her dress and walked out of the pantry like nothing had happened. I'd planned to tell my husband after dinner, but then everything exploded, and the mystery of her strange interrogation had been pushed aside. Until now. She asked about my mother's maiden name. I told my husband. Whitfield. She acted like it meant something. He shook his head slowly. I don't understand any of this. Neither do I. But I think your father might. We found him in the kitchen, sitting alone at the table with a glass of bourbon. The house was quiet. My sister-in-law had taken her family to a hotel. My brother-in-law was passed out on the couch. The remnants of Thanksgiving dinner sat untouched on the counter, the turkey carcass picked clean by stress eaters. My father-in-law looked up when we entered. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear. Couldn't sleep either, he said. Pour yourself something. We might as well be insomniacs together. My husband sat down across from him. Dad, we need to ask you something. I watched my father-in-law's shoulders tense, like a man bracing for impact. Someone sent me a text tonight, I said. About Gwendolyn. About a first marriage. The glass stopped halfway to his lips. Raymond Voss. I continued. Does that name mean anything to you? The glass came down hard on the table. Bourbon sloshed over the rim. My father-in-law's face had gone gray, like all the blood had rushed somewhere else. Where did you hear that name? He whispered. So it's true, my husband said. Mom was married before. My father-in-law was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the darkness. I met your mother in 1989, he began. She was singing in the church choir, voice like an angel, face like one too. I was 28 years old, recently divorced myself, new to town, lonely. She was 26 and the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. He turned back to face us. What she didn't tell me until after we were engaged was that she'd been married before. At 18, to a man named Raymond Voss. My husband's face was unreadable. Why didn't she tell you? Because Raymond Voss didn't just divorce her. He destroyed her. At least, that's what she told me. She said he was abusive, controlling, that he isolated her from her family, convinced her she was worthless. When she finally escaped, she was so ashamed she never told anyone. She made me promise to keep her secret. And you did, I said. For 30 years. He nodded heavily. I loved her. I believed her. And back then, people didn't talk about these things. A woman's past was her own business. But, my husband prompted, but over the years, I started to notice things. The way she controlled every situation. The way she manipulated people. The way she could twist any story to make herself the victim. He sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. I started to wonder if maybe the story she told me wasn't the whole truth. Maybe Raymond Voss wasn't the monster. Maybe he was just the first person who tried to leave her. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I tried to find him once, my father-in-law continued. About 15 years ago. I hired a private investigator, told Gwendolyn I was looking into a business partner's background. What did you find? I asked. Nothing. Raymond Voss disappeared in 1987. No death certificate, no forwarding address, no trace of him anywhere. What do you mean disappeared? My husband asked. I mean exactly what I said. One day he existed. The next day he didn't. It's like he evaporated into thin air. My phone buzzed again. All three of us jumped. I looked at the screen. Another message from the unknown number. Raymond didn't disappear. He's been hiding. From her. Ask her what happened on March 14th, 1987. I showed the message to my father-in-law. His face went even grayer. March 14th, he whispered. That's the date she told me they got divorced. I typed back quickly. Who are you? How do you know all this? The response came immediately. I'm Raymond's son, and your mother-in-law tried to kill my father. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered on the table. My husband grabbed it, read the message, and looked at his father with wild eyes. Dad, what the hell is going on? My father-in-law was shaking his head slowly, back and forth, like a man trying to wake from a nightmare. I don't know, he said, but I think we need to find out. I picked up my phone with trembling hands. Can we meet? The response took longer this time. Almost 2 full minutes of those 3 dots appearing and disappearing. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The coffee shop on Maple Street. Come alone. Don't tell Gwendolyn. I showed the message to my husband. You're not going alone, he said immediately. If I don't go alone, he might not show up. Then I'm going with you. We'll sit at different tables. I'll pretend not to know you. And if he recognizes you, you look exactly like your mother. My husband flinched. I hadn't meant it as an insult, but we both knew it was true. The same sharp cheekbones, the same piercing eyes, the same way of holding himself like he was always bracing for a fight. My father-in-law stood up. I'll go with you. He doesn't know me. And I deserve to hear the truth about the woman I've been married to for 3 decades. I looked at him. This man who had spent 30 years tiptoeing around his wife's moods, making himself small to keep the peace, watching his children learn to fear their own mother. Okay, I said. We'll go together. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed scrolling through every search result I could find for Raymond Voss. There were dozens of men with that name, but none of them seemed right. A dentist in Florida, a high school teacher in Oregon, a retired plumber in Maine, none of them matched the timeline. Around 3 a.m., I found something. A newspaper article from the Cedar Falls Gazette, dated March 20th, 1987. Local man missing, wife sought for questioning. Raymond Voss, 29, was reported missing on March 15th after failing to appear for work. His wife, Gwendolyn Voss, née Porter, has been cooperative with authorities but was unable to provide information about her husband's whereabouts. The couple had reportedly been experiencing marital difficulties. I stared at the grainy photograph that accompanied the article. Raymond Voss was handsome in a quiet way. Soft eyes, gentle smile. He looked nothing like the monster Gwendolyn had described. Beneath the article was an update from 2 weeks later. The search for Raymond Voss has been suspended pending new evidence. His wife has relocated to an undisclosed location. And then nothing. No follow-up stories. No resolution. Just a man who vanished and a woman who moved on. I finally fell asleep around 5 a.m. and dreamed of pantries and church choirs and men who disappeared without a trace. When I woke up, it was past noon. My husband was already dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed watching me. "Dad's ready," he said. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. I found an article last night. From 1987, Raymond Voss was reported missing. The police wanted to question your mother. He was quiet for a long moment. "I know," he said finally. "Dad showed me this morning. He found the same article. Why didn't you wake me up?" "Because you needed to sleep. And because I needed time to process the fact that my mother might be a—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "We don't know anything yet," I said gently. "We're just going to listen." The coffee shop on Maple Street was nearly empty at 2 p.m. on Black Friday. Everyone was at the mall, hunting for deals. We had the place almost to ourselves. My father-in-law and I sat at a corner table, nursing coffees we didn't want. My husband was parked across the street, watching through the window. At exactly 2 p.m., a man walked in. He was in his mid-30s with sandy brown hair and those same soft eyes I'd seen in the newspaper photograph. Raymond Voss's son. There was no doubt about it. He scanned the room, spotted us, and walked over slowly. When he reached our table, he didn't sit down. He just stood there, studying my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You look just like her," he said. "Just like my mother." I blinked. "What?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. A young woman with dark hair and green eyes, smiling at the camera. "She could have been my twin." "Eloise Whitfield," he said. "My mother. She died when I was 3. The room tilted sideways. "Whitfield," I repeated. "That's my mother's maiden name, but her name was Patricia. Patricia Whitfield." The man sat down heavily. "Patricia was my mother's younger sister. She left Cedar Falls right after my mother died. Moved across the country. Changed her name. Tried to start over. I felt like I was falling." "Why?" I managed. "Because she was afraid," he said. "She knew what really happened to my father. And she was afraid Gwendolyn would come for her next." "This doesn't make any sense," I said. "My mother never mentioned a sister. Never mentioned Cedar Falls. She told me she was an only child from California." The man leaned forward. "Your grandmother was named Helen Whitfield. She had 2 daughters, Eloise and Patricia. In 1983, Eloise married my father, Raymond Voss. 2 years later, they had me. In 1987, when I was barely 2 years old, my father disappeared." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Everyone assumed he'd run off, started a new life somewhere. That's the story the police bought. That's the story Gwendolyn sold to everyone." "Gwendolyn," I said. "How does she fit into this?" "She was my father's childhood sweetheart. They dated in high school. She expected him to marry her, but he fell in love with my mother instead." He pulled out another photograph. This one showed 3 young people at what looked like a prom. Raymond Voss in the center, flanked by 2 women. One was clearly a young Gwendolyn. Same sharp features, same cold eyes. The other was softer, prettier, with an innocent smile. "Eloise," I said, pointing to the second woman. He nodded. "Gwendolyn never forgave him for choosing her. And she never forgave my mother for stealing him away." "But you said your mother died when you were 3, I said. "That was after your father disappeared." The man's expression darkened. "My mother was found at the bottom of a ravine 6 months after my father vanished. The police ruled it an accident, said she was probably distraught over her missing husband, lost control of her car." He leaned closer. "But my grandmother never believed it. She said my mother would never have left me behind. She was convinced Gwendolyn was responsible. For both of them." My father-in-law made a small sound. I'd almost forgotten he was there. His face was the color of ash. "I married her 6 months after your mother died," he said hoarsely. "She told me she was a victim of abuse, that her first husband had tormented her for years." The man turned to him with something like pity. "My father never laid a hand on anyone in his life. He was gentle, kind. The worst thing he ever did was love the wrong woman. Or rather, not love the right one. And Gwendolyn made him pay for that." "I need proof," I said. "I'm not saying I don't believe you, but if any of this is true, we need evidence." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "My grandmother spent 30 years gathering this. Every police report, every newspaper clipping, every witness statement. She was convinced that one day, someone would finally be willing to listen." He slid the envelope across the table. "She died last month. Left me everything with instructions to find you." "Me? Why me?" Because you married into that family. Because you're Patricia Whitfield's daughter. The only person who might be able to get close enough to expose Gwendolyn. And because my grandmother believed that secrets have a way of coming back around. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The first page was a handwritten letter, the penmanship shaky but determined. Dear Jordan, you don't know me, but I've been watching you from afar. When I heard you married Gwendolyn Porter's son, I knew it was only a matter of time before you discovered the truth about her. Your mother was my daughter. She changed her name and ran away because she was afraid, but she could never escape what she knew, and neither can you. Inside this envelope, you'll find everything I've collected over 30 years. Police reports that were mysteriously closed, witness statements that were never followed up on, medical records that don't add up, and photographs. Photographs of my daughter Eloise and her husband Raymond, the happy life they built together before Gwendolyn destroyed it all. I don't have much time left. The cancer is spreading, but before I go, I need someone to know the truth, to do what I was never brave enough to do. Gwendolyn killed my son-in-law. She killed my daughter. And she's been living as a pillar of the community for 30 years while my family rotted in the ground. Make her pay. Helen Whitfield. I set the letter down. My hands were trembling so badly the paper shook like a leaf in a hurricane. My father-in-law took the letter and read it himself. When he finished, he folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. All these years, he said quietly, all these years, I thought I was the coward, thought I was weak for staying with her. But she was playing me from the beginning. He looked at Raymond's son. What's your name? Bennett. Bennett Voss. Bennett, my father-in-law said, and his voice cracked on the syllables. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what she took from you. Bennett's jaw tightened. Apologies don't bring back my parents, but justice might. I gathered the envelope and stood up. I need time to go through all of this, to verify everything. If this is true, if even half of it is true, we're talking about going to the police, about reopening cases that have been closed for decades. Bennett nodded. I understand, but be careful. Gwendolyn has gotten away with this for 30 years because people underestimate her. They see a church-going grandmother and think she's harmless. He stood as well. She's not harmless. She's a predator, and she's been hunting my family for 3 generations. He handed me a business card. Call me when you're ready, day or night. Then he walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me holding an envelope full of accusations and a letter from a dead woman who claimed to be my grandmother. My father-in-law drove us home in silence. My husband met us at the door, his face tight with worry. What happened? What did he say? I walked past him to the kitchen table, spread out the contents of the envelope, and spent the next 4 hours reading. The police reports told a story of bureaucratic failure. Raymond Voss had been reported missing on March 15, 1987. His wife, Gwendolyn, had given a statement saying he'd been depressed, had talked about starting over somewhere new. The police had accepted her story with minimal investigation. The witness statements were more damning. A neighbor who saw Gwendolyn's car at Raymond and Eloise's house the night he disappeared. A co-worker who said Raymond had confided that someone was stalking him. A friend of Eloise's who said Eloise was afraid of her husband's ex-girlfriend. The medical records were the worst. Eloise had visited the emergency room 3 times in the 6 months between Raymond's disappearance and her death. Broken wrist, cracked rib, concussion from a fall. Each time she claimed it was an accident. The final document in the envelope was a death certificate. Eloise Marie Whitfield Voss. Cause of death, blunt force trauma consistent with vehicular accident. But clipped to the death certificate was a photograph. Eloise's car at the bottom of the ravine. And in the background, barely visible, was another car parked at the top of the cliff. A car that looked exactly like the one my mother-in-law still drove. I showed the photograph to my father-in-law. That's her car, I said. Isn't it? He took the photograph with trembling hands, studied it for a long moment. It could be, he said finally. But this is 30 years ago. The image is grainy. A defense attorney would tear it apart. So what do? We find more evidence. Something concrete. Something she can't explain away. My husband, who had been silent this entire time, finally spoke. There's one person who might know more. We all looked at him. Aunt Cordelia, he said. Mom's older sister. They had a falling out years ago. Mom refuses to talk about her. But I remember visiting her house when I was little. She had all these photo albums, kept everything. Where does she live now? I asked. Last I heard, she was in a nursing home about 2 hours from here. Shady Pines, I think. She has dementia, so I don't know how much she'll remember. We need to try, I said. The next morning, we piled into the car and drove to Shady Pines. The nursing home was exactly what the name suggested. A faded building surrounded by pine trees, with a parking lot full of elderly visitors and harried-looking staff. Cordelia Porter was in room 217. The nurse warned us that she had good days and bad days, and we'd caught her somewhere in between. We found her sitting by the window, wrapped in a crocheted blanket, staring at the pine trees outside. She was thin and fragile, with wispy white hair and clouded blue eyes. But when she turned to look at us, something flickered in her expression. You look like Patricia, she said to me. Patricia Whitfield. She used to babysit for me. I knelt beside her chair. Patricia was my mother, I said. She passed away 5 years ago. Cordelia's face crumpled. Pretty Patricia. She was always so scared, always looking over her shoulder. Scared of what? I asked gently. Scared of her. Cordelia's voice dropped to a whisper. Scared of Gwendolyn. My husband stepped forward. Aunt Cordelia, it's me, your nephew. She squinted at him. You look like your mother. Same eyes. Same cold eyes. He flinched but didn't back away. We need to ask you about something that happened a long time ago. About Raymond Voss. The effect was immediate. Cordelia's entire body went rigid. Her hands clutched the arms of her chair like claws. We don't speak that name, she hissed. We never speak that name. Please, I said. We need to know the truth about what Gwendolyn did. Cordelia's eyes darted to the door like she expected her sister to materialize out of thin air. She'll hear you, she whispered. She always hears. She has ears everywhere. She's not here, my father-in-law said. She doesn't know we came. Cordelia studied him for a long moment. Then something in her seemed to relax. You're the husband, she said. The second one, the one she fooled. Yes, she fooled everyone. That's what she does. But I know. I've always known. She beckoned us closer. Raymond was a good man. Too good for her. When he fell in love with Eloise, Gwendolyn went crazy. Showed up at their wedding uninvited. Made a scene. Said she'd make them both pay. What happened? I asked. For a few years, nothing. Gwendolyn married some boy from the next town. Divorced him quick. Then she started showing up places. At Raymond's work. At Eloise's church. Always watching. Always smiling that smile of hers. Cordelia shuddered. Then the baby came. Little Bennett. And that's when things got bad. Bad how? Raymond came to me once. Said someone had been in their house while they were out. Nothing stolen, but things moved around. A picture frame turned face down. Baby clothes rearranged. He was scared. Said it felt like someone was sending a message. Did he go to the police? Police didn't care. No crime committed. Just a nervous new father with an overactive imagination. That's what they said. She gripped my hand with surprising strength. A week later, Raymond was gone. Vanished. And Gwendolyn showed up at their house the very next day, all sympathy and concern. Offered to help Eloise with the baby. Said she knew what it was like to be abandoned. Eloise let her in, I said. Cordelia nodded miserably. She was desperate. Scared. And Gwendolyn was so helpful. At first. What changed? The accident started. Eloise would fall down the stairs, trip over something that wasn't there. Her brakes would fail for no reason. And always, Gwendolyn was nearby. Always with that same concerned smile. You knew, I said. You knew and you didn't do anything. Cordelia's eyes filled with tears. I tried. I told the police my suspicions. They laughed at me. Said I was a jealous older sister trying to make trouble. Gwendolyn had everyone fooled. The church, the community, even our own parents. She wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. When Eloise died, I knew it was her. But I couldn't prove it. And Patricia, pretty Patricia, she knew too. That's why she ran. Changed her name. Started over. She was the only witness, you see. Witness to what? Cordelia leaned in close, her voice barely audible. Patricia saw Gwendolyn's car that night. The night Eloise died. She was driving behind her on the mountain road. Saw Gwendolyn's car pull up behind Eloise's. Saw what happened next. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What did she see? She saw Gwendolyn's car bump Eloise's. Gentle at first, then harder, pushing her toward the edge. Patricia pulled over, too scared to move. She watched Eloise's car go over the cliff. And then she watched Gwendolyn get out of her car and look down. Just look. Like she was admiring her work. I felt sick. Why didn't my mother go to the police? Because Gwendolyn saw her. Turned around and saw Patricia's car parked on the shoulder. They locked eyes. And Gwendolyn smiled. Cordelia's grip on my hand tightened. The next day, our parents' barn caught fire. No one was hurt, but everything Patricia owned was inside. Her clothes, her photographs, her diary, all of it, gone. And there was a note in the ashes. What did it say? 2 words. Keep quiet. Patricia left that night. Didn't tell anyone where she was going. Didn't say goodbye. Just vanished. Like Raymond had vanished. I didn't hear from her for almost 20 years. By then, she had a new name, a new life, and a daughter. You. She touched my face gently. You have her eyes. Her kindness. But you have something she didn't. What's that? You're not afraid. I drove home in a daze. Everything I thought I knew about my mother was a lie. She wasn't an only child from California. She was a traumatized witness to a murder who had spent her entire life running from a monster. And that monster was my mother-in-law. When we got back to the house, my husband sat me down in the living room. We need to talk, he said. I know. This is too dangerous. If even half of what Aunt Cordelia said is true, my mother is capable of anything. I can't let you put yourself at risk. It's too late for that, I said. She already knows something's wrong. The way she interrogated me before dinner. The questions about my mother's maiden name. She's been suspicious of me from the beginning. Because you look like Eloise, my father-in-law said quietly. He'd been sitting in the corner listening. I didn't notice at first, but now I can't unsee it. The resemblance is uncanny. You think she recognized me? I think she recognized your bloodline, and it terrified her. Good, I said. She should be terrified, because I'm going to do what my mother was too afraid to do. I'm going to expose her. The next few weeks were a blur of research and planning. Bennett provided us with everything his grandmother had collected. My father-in-law hired a private investigator to dig up additional records. I spent hours on ancestry websites, piecing together the family tree my mother had tried so hard to erase. The picture that emerged was damning. Gwendolyn Porter had been engaged to Raymond Voss in 1982. When he broke off the engagement to marry Eloise Whitfield, Gwendolyn had suffered what her family called a nervous breakdown. She spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility, then emerged seemingly recovered. But witness statements from that era painted a different picture. Raymond's co-workers reported strange incidents: slashed tires, threatening letters, a dead bird left on his doorstep. Eloise's friends said she'd been terrified in the months before Raymond disappeared. One friend had even encouraged her to get a restraining order. She didn't, because Gwendolyn was too clever. There was never any concrete evidence, never any proof, just a mounting sense of dread that something terrible was coming. And then it came. On March 14, 1987, Raymond Voss left work at 5 p.m. and was never seen again. His car was found abandoned 2 days later, parked at a scenic overlook with the keys still in the ignition. The official theory was suicide, but no body was ever found. 6 months later, Eloise was dead. And 6 months after that, Gwendolyn married my father-in-law. The timeline was too perfect to be coincidental. I compiled everything into a detailed report and drove to the police station. The detective who reviewed my evidence was skeptical at first. "These cases are over 30 years old," she said. "Witnesses are dead or unreliable. Physical evidence has degraded or been lost." "But I have something you didn't have before," I said. "I have a living witness." "Your aunt? The one with dementia?" "No." I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made of Cordelia's testimony. And then I played the recording I'd made of my own mother 5 years ago, when she was dying of cancer and wanted to finally tell the truth. I'd found it buried in her belongings last week. A cassette tape labeled "For Jordan, when you're ready." On the tape, my mother's voice, weak but determined, described everything she'd witnessed that night on the mountain road. The bumping, the pushing, the terrible moment when Eloise's car had tipped over the edge, and Gwendolyn's smile in the rearview mirror. "It wasn't suicide," my mother said on the tape. "It wasn't an accident. It was murder. And I've been running from the woman who did it for my entire adult life. I'm so sorry, Jordan. I'm sorry I never told you. I was trying to protect you. But if you're hearing this, it means you found out anyway. Please be careful. Please don't let her hurt you too." The detective listened to the tape twice. Then she made a phone call. 2 days later, the case was officially reopened. The investigation took 3 months. They found Raymond Voss, or rather they found what was left of him. His remains had been buried in the basement of a house Gwendolyn had owned briefly in 1987, a house she'd sold just weeks after his disappearance. The new owners had never done any renovations, so the basement had remained undisturbed for decades. When the forensic team unearthed the bones, they found something else. A wedding ring inscribed with the words, "Forever yours, Eloise." Raymond had never abandoned his wife. He'd been murdered and buried by the woman who couldn't accept that he'd chosen someone else. The evidence against Gwendolyn mounted quickly after that. Phone records, financial transactions, a storage unit full of items she'd taken from Raymond and Eloise's home, trophies of her crimes. The day they arrested her, I was standing on my front porch. She was being led to a police car in handcuffs, her perfect hair disheveled, her church-going facade finally crumbling. When she saw me, she stopped dead in her tracks. "You," she hissed. "You did this." "No," I said calmly. "You did this. 35 years ago. I just made sure you finally answered for it." Her eyes blazed with hatred. "I knew what you were the moment I saw you. Patricia's daughter. I should have dealt with you the way I dealt with the others." The detective standing beside her tightened her grip. "Ma'am, I strongly advise you to stop talking." But Gwendolyn wasn't finished. "Your mother was a coward," she spat. "She watched and did nothing. And you think you're so brave? You're nothing. You're—" The detective shoved her into the car and slammed the door. I stood there until the car pulled away. Then I went inside and cried for 3 hours straight. The trial was a media circus. The church-going grandmother accused of double homicide. The 35-year-old cold case finally solved. The daughter-in-law who brought down a monster. I testified for 6 hours over 2 days. So did my father-in-law. So did Bennett Voss, who finally got to speak for the parents he never knew. Cordelia was too frail to appear in person, but her recorded testimony was played for the jury. The tape my mother had left me was played in its entirety. When the verdict came in, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder, there was no celebration, just a profound, exhausted sense of relief. Gwendolyn was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At her sentencing hearing, she was given the opportunity to speak. She stood up, looked directly at me and said, "I have no regrets. Raymond was mine. He was always supposed to be mine. And if I couldn't have him, no one could." The judge called her statement chilling evidence of a disturbed and dangerous mind. I called it the first honest thing she'd ever said. After the trial, my husband and I moved across the country. We needed a fresh start, away from the town where his mother had built her empire of lies. His siblings scattered too. His sister moved to Europe. His brother relocated to Alaska. The family that Gwendolyn had held together through fear finally fell apart, but in the best possible way. They were free now, free to be themselves, free to heal. My father-in-law filed for divorce. At 64 years old, he started over. He moved to a small coastal town, took up woodworking, and finally began the therapy he'd needed for decades. Bennett Voss and I stayed in touch. We were connected now in ways neither of us had expected. His grandmother's dying wish had brought us together, and we'd found a kind of kinship in our shared loss. He told me once that he'd spent his entire life feeling like something was missing, like there was a hole where his parents should have been. Now at least he knew the truth, and the woman responsible was behind bars. As for me, I learned something important through all of this. My husband had spent our entire marriage telling me I was too sensitive, that I overreacted, that I saw problems where none existed. But my sensitivity was the only reason any of this came to light. I noticed the cruelty that everyone else had normalized. I questioned the behavior that everyone else had excused. I refused to accept that this is just how she is was an acceptable explanation for abuse. And in the end, my sensitivity brought a murderer to justice. Some people will spend their whole lives telling you that your instincts are wrong, that you're making mountains out of molehills, that you need to calm down, let it go, keep the peace, don't listen to them. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's a gift. It's the thing that allows you to see what others refuse to see, to feel what others have gone numb to recognize danger when everyone else is too comfortable to notice. My mother-in-law spent 30 years getting away with murder because no one was willing to make waves. No one wanted to be the difficult one. No one wanted to be too sensitive. I was willing. And because of that, 2 people who had been denied justice for 3 decades finally got it. 1 year after Gwendolyn's conviction, I received a letter. It was from her. Written on prison stationery, in that precise handwriting I'd come to recognize from the evidence files. Dear Jordan, you think you've won. You think you've beaten me, but you don't understand. I made that family. I built it from nothing. I held it together for 30 years. And you, an outsider, a nobody, a woman my son should never have married. You destroyed it in a matter of months. You should be proud, I suppose. It takes a certain kind of ruthlessness to do what you did, to tear apart a family and call it justice. But here's what you don't know. I'm not the only one with secrets. Every family has them. Every marriage has them. And yours is no exception. Ask your husband about Montreal. Ask him what happened there in 2019. Ask him why he really transferred to a new company. You think you know him. You don't. No one ever really knows anyone. Sleep well. Gwendolyn. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it up, put it in a drawer, and walked into the kitchen where my husband was making dinner. He looked up and smiled. You okay? I thought about the letter, about Montreal, about the secrets every marriage carries, and I made a decision. I'm fine, I said. Just tired. I'd spent the last year uncovering other people's secrets. I'd torn apart a family to expose a truth that had been buried for decades. Maybe some secrets deserved to stay buried. Or maybe I was just too exhausted to go digging again. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down at the table. What's for dinner? I asked. Pasta, he said. Your favorite. He brought me a plate, kissed the top of my head, and sat across from me. I love you, he said. I don't say it enough. I love you too. We ate in comfortable silence. And I didn't think about Montreal at all. That night I slept better than I had in months. Whatever secrets my husband was hiding, they could wait. I'd earned a rest. I'd earned some peace. The letter from Gwendolyn sat in my drawer, waiting. But some things I decided didn't need to be found. Some truths were better left in the dark, at least for now. 2 years later, my husband and I welcomed our first child. We named her Eloise. My father-in-law cried when we told him. Bennett Voss sent flowers. And somewhere in a maximum security prison, Gwendolyn Porter found out that her son had named his daughter after the woman she'd murdered. I hoped it haunted her. I hoped she lay awake at night, thinking about the life she could have had if she'd just let Raymond go, the family she could have built, the grandchildren she could have known. Instead, she had a concrete cell and the knowledge that her legacy was nothing but destruction. Meanwhile, I had everything. A husband who finally saw me clearly, a daughter with her grandmother's name, a family built on truth instead of fear. Some people would say I was too sensitive. I'd say I was exactly sensitive enough, and that made all the difference.